Lesson 2 is on hieroglyphics, the writing system of ancient Egypt. Today's schedule, after finishing up any past notes, we talked about Egyptian vocabulary, we did our hieroglyphics lesson, and then we did a name cartouche activity. And with any extra time at the end, we watched the CNN 10 news. The I can for today was I can write my name in hieroglyphics. So, vocabulary first. A pharaoh was the term for an Egyptian king, also seen as a god. Papyrus is a type of early paper made from the papyrus plant in Egypt. Embalm means the process of preserving a body. We use that term for Egyptian embalming or mummy making, but we still use that term today. Ancient means very old. Pyramid is a large stone building built as a tomb, so it's a little different than an Aztec or a Mayan temple or a ziggurat of Mesopotamia, which look similar, but those were temples. Pyramids are built as tombs. A sarcophagus is a large stone coffin. Hieroglyphics is a system of writing that uses pictures. And an obelisk, or obelisk, is a tall stone monument with kind of a point on the top like the Washington Monument. So our hieroglyphics notes today were pretty quick. Hieroglyphics is using pictures to write words. It could also be written in any direction, and it took years for scribes to learn how to read and write it because it was so complicated. How can we translate hieroglyphics? Well, we got lucky. Some historians found a stone which we call the Rosetta Stone. It's called the Rosetta Stone because that's the name of the town in Egypt where it was found, Rosetta. And we got lucky because it just happened to have the same message carved into it 3 times. The message was in both ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics and a more modern Egyptian language called Demotic. And it was also in Greek. And Greek was not a lost language. Millions of people still speak ancient Greek today. The whole country of Greece speaks Greek. So we got very lucky in that it had the same message in hieroglyphics in Greek. We could translate the message, and from the information we learned translating the Rosetta Stone and the hieroglyphics on it, we then could begin to translate all of the hieroglyphic inscriptions throughout Egypt. So this shows that hieroglyphics can be carved into stone, and it can be written horizontally. With hieroglyphics being able to be written in so many different directions, the question is, well, how do you know which way to read hieroglyphics? The answer to that is look at the direction that the birds and the people are facing. If there are any animals in the hieroglyphics, whichever way the animals are facing, that's the direction you should read it. Hieroglyphics could also be written vertically. This is painted on plaster on a tomb wall. I put this picture in there because I wanted to show that in ancient times, hieroglyphics was actually quite colorful. The Egyptians painted the hieroglyphics that were on monuments. Nowadays, it's all quite plain as it's washed off over the 2,000 to 5,000 years since it was carved. This is a picture of some papyrus plants. We're going to have a lesson on papyrus later, but these are papyrus plants, and the stalks of the plant are cut into strips and laid together to make papyrus sheets, or sheets of papyrus paper or scrolls. Today we also talked about ancient Egyptian art. You know, it's a very distinctive style. The head is always shown from the side, but the body is forward facing, which shows the full eye. It also has both legs turned the same side as the head, and one foot's always kind of out in front of the other so you can see both. People stand very rigid, and bigger people are more important. So the scale isn't always quite on, because if somebody's important, like a pharaoh, they're drawn to be much larger than everyone else. Artists also use just raw materials around them, so there's a limited number of colors in original Egyptian artwork. And oftentimes men's skin is kind of painted red and women's was more of a yellowish tint. So here we can see kind of some modern copies of hieroglyphics drawn on papyrus and the Egyptian art style as well. People are from the side. Here on the right we have Pharaoh Akhenaten worshiping the Aten, the sun disk. And you can see that he's huge, and probably his wife behind him and maybe a servant or priest behind her is much smaller than he is. Of course, in actuality, he wasn't really that much taller than them. He just is deemed more important, therefore he was carved or drawn to be so much bigger. We can see more examples of the Egyptian style here with one foot out in front of the other and both arms being shown. This pharaoh riding in a chariot. You can see the hooves of the horses. These are non-examples. If you went to Egypt today, you just might see kind of some three-dimensional or shading on these pictures on papyrus paper. Nice, but not actual examples of what Egyptian art would have been like back then. Next up, we talked about a cartouche. In Egyptian hieroglyphics, if you see this kind of elongated oval with a little stand at the bottom, that is called a cartouche. And the hieroglyphics inside of the cartouche are a person's name. So if you see this cartouche, it's just an indication that that's a person's name. On the left, we have the cartouche for Ramses II, Ramses the Great. On the right, that's the cartouche for King Tut, Tutankhamun. Here we have the cartouche carved in stone for the Pharaoh Queen Hatshepsut. Lastly today, we talked about writing our name in hieroglyphics and drawing a self-portrait of ourselves, Egyptian style. Here's kind of one from Egypt. This is a little bit more what we did today. So here is an example I prepared earlier. Inside of the name Cartouche, it says Mellor, my last name, Mellor. And I put an example of both a male and a female figure so the kids could kind of see what we're looking for here. There's myself wearing the awesome Pharaoh's crown of Egypt, but I'm holding a football because I like football. So the activity was to draw yourself. It could be even holding something more modern, but it just had to be in the Egyptian style. And here is the hieroglyphic alphabet that we used in class to write our names in hieroglyphics. Yes, the V and the W is the same. There are two N's. I'm not sure why. There might be some letters missing, but it was just for fun and kind of shows what sounds in Egyptian, what shapes make similar sounds to our English alphabet. So we ended the day with kind of just a fun art activity.